The city pulsed below the tall glass tower, lights flickering like restless stars. In an office that never truly slept, Ethan Grayson stared at the endless skyline through rain-spotted windows. His reflection was sharp in the glass. The perfect CEO, immaculately dressed, controlled, unreadable. Yet beneath that polished surface, exhaustion clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake off. The day had stretched into another night of unending meetings, signatures, and hollow congratulations. Somewhere between success and solitude. He had lost the sound of peace. He loosened his tie and set his watch aside, its ticking suddenly too loud. The world outside whispered with rain, and inside everything stood still. The city thrived without him. For a moment, he wished he could trade his title for a quiet life, somewhere far from neon lights and corporate thrones. But empires did not run on wishes. They ran on people like him, who forgot what it felt like to be human. He glanced at the photo on his desk. One he rarely noticed anymore. It showed a much younger version of himself with his mother, standing beside a half-built house in a small coastal town. He hadn't been back there since she passed away. Somewhere deep down, he still heard her voice when the nights grew too long. "Build something you can live in, Ethan, not just something that makes others look up." The door creaked open, pulling him out of thought. A soft voice followed. "You're still here." He turned. Standing by the door was his assistant, Clara Wynne, her coat folded over one arm. Her hair was damp from the rain, framing a face that carried both determination and quiet concern. She was younger than him by a decade, yet her eyes held the kind of wisdom that came from surviving more than life. She'd ask of someone her age. "I told you to go home hours ago," he said, his voice rough, but not unkind. "I know," she replied, placing a folder on his desk. "But you'd miss the quarterly deadline if I didn't finish these." He gave a faint smile. "You make me sound helpless. You'd forget to eat without my reminders," she said, smirking just enough to soften her words. Ethan shook his head and stood, walking toward the window again. "You shouldn't work this late. This place eats people alive." Her tone softened. "Then maybe it needs someone to remind it what people look like." He turned, surprised by the quiet honesty in her voice. She wasn't wrong. For months, she had been the one constant in his life that felt real, no pretense, no agenda. Just presence. He found himself watching her longer than he should have before breaking the silence. "Go home, Clara. Get some rest." "I will," she said, though her tone made it sound like a promise she wouldn't keep. After she left, silence thickened again. Ethan poured himself a glass of water and tried to finish the reports, but the words blurred. At some point, fatigue claimed him. He pushed back from his desk and walked to the elevator, too tired to think. When the doors opened to his penthouse, the lights were dim, the air filled with the faint scent of cedar and rain. He slipped off his shoes and walked through the quiet apartment. The kind of quiet that could drive a man mad. The bed waited, untouched, as it always did. But tonight felt heavier. He sat at the edge for a moment before lying back, closing his eyes. The world faded into a haze of light and sound, and sleep came faster than he expected. Hours passed. The rain slowed. The storm outside turned to a soft drizzle. Ethan stirred half awake, sensing something unfamiliar. The faintest sound of breathing beside him. His eyes opened to find a figure on the other side of the bed, curled up, asleep beneath the blanket. His chest tightened. He blinked, certain he was dreaming, but the outline didn't fade. A woman's hair spread across the pillow, the soft rhythm of her breathing steady against the quiet. He froze, his heart beat loud in the stillness. He leaned forward, careful, afraid to wake her. Then the city's glow caught her face, and recognition struck him hard. Clara, his mind raced through questions that made no sense. How had she even gotten in? Why was she here? She was wearing one of his shirts, sleeves too long, the fabric brushing her hands. For a second, he thought she might be hurt, maybe fainted after working too late. But she looked peaceful, as if she belonged in that space. The sight disarmed him completely. Ethan stepped back, struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. The CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms, couldn't find a single word to say. He should call security, but something stopped him. Something quieter. Something that reached into the hollow parts of his chest. He stood there, for what felt like an eternity before whispering her name. Clara. She stirred slightly, shifting under the blanket. Then her eyes fluttered open. Confusion flickered across her face as she blinked at the unfamiliar room, then at him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came at first. Then she sat up abruptly, realization flooding her expression. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her gaze darted between him and the bed, her face flushing crimson. I wasn't supposed to." Ethan held up a hand. "It's all right. Just breathe." She shook her head, mortified. "No, it's not all right. I must have. I was working in your office, and it was late, and the storm started. I went to make coffee, but I spilled it all over myself. My clothes were soaked, so I borrowed a shirt from the emergency wardrobe. I meant to dry off and rest for a moment, but I must have fallen asleep, and I have no idea how I got here." Ethan listened quietly, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. "You walked into my penthouse while asleep?" Her hands covered her face. "Please, don't make it sound worse than it is." Despite himself, a quiet chuckle escaped his lips. "It's a little difficult not to." She peeked through her fingers. "You're laughing at me, only a little." Her mortified expression softened into reluctant amusement. "This is officially the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to me." "I can imagine," he said. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't cold anymore. He could see her trying to hold on to her composure, hair tousled, wearing his oversized shirt like an accidental secret. Something about the moment felt fragile, like a line neither of them had meant to cross. He finally broke the silence. "You're not fired," her head snapped up. "You're serious?" "Completely." Relief washed over her features, followed by a small, uncertain smile. "Thank you," Ethan nodded. "Though you'll have to explain this to security tomorrow. They'll be very confused," she groaned, sinking back against the pillow. "Can we skip tomorrow? For your sake, I wish we could." He turned toward the window, trying to steady the swirl of thoughts in his mind. The rain outside had softened into mist, the city glowing beneath it. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. When he looked back at her, she had pulled the blanket up to her chin, eyes half closed again. Exhaustion had caught her once more, softening the edges of her panic. Ethan watched for a moment, then quietly turned off the light. He didn't know what this night meant, or why it felt like the first real moment he'd had in years. But something deep inside him whispered that nothing would be the same when morning came. And somewhere, beneath the hum of the sleeping city, two lives that had always stayed neatly apart had just begun to tangle in ways neither of them could yet understand. The sun crept gently through the glass walls of the penthouse, washing the marble floor with light. Ethan opened his eyes to the sound of the city waking below him. For a brief moment, he forgot everything that had happened. Then he saw the faint shape on the couch across the room, Clara asleep again, wrapped in a blanket. Reality rushed back, quiet but undeniable. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His head felt heavy, though he hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. It was the kind of heaviness that came from too many thoughts chasing each other in circles. He hadn't planned any of this, hadn't expected his carefully ordered world to tilt overnight. But somehow, in the strangest of ways, it didn't feel like a disaster. He walked quietly to the kitchen and started the coffee machine. The aroma filled the space warm, grounding, and oddly comforting. As the machine hummed, he glanced toward the couch. Clara stirred, then blinked awake. Her expression went through several stages of realization before settling somewhere between horror and disbelief. "Oh no," she whispered, sitting up quickly. "I didn't dream it, did I?" Ethan turned toward her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Afraid not. You're very real and still here." She groaned, covering her face with her hands. "I was hoping I'd imagined the most humiliating night of my life." He poured 2 cups of coffee and walked over, setting one on the table near her. "If it makes you feel better, I'm not sure which of us had the stranger night." Her eyes peeked through her fingers, cautious but amused. "You're really calm about this?" "Most people would call security." "I thought about it," he admitted. Then I realized I didn't want to explain to them why my assistant was asleep in my bed wearing my shirt. Her laugh escaped before she could stop at a small, genuine sound that filled the room with unexpected warmth. She took the cup and sipped. "Thank you. For not firing me, and for not calling the police." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her. "You talk like someone who's expecting punishment for existing." Her smile faltered. "Old habits. It's easier to apologize first." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You shouldn't have to." For a moment, silence stretched between them, not awkward but thoughtful. She looked at him, really looked in, saw more than the title, more than the sharp suits and late meetings. She saw a man who had forgotten how to rest. "I should go," she said suddenly, setting down her cup. "Before the building staff starts arriving." "If anyone sees me leaving in your shirt, they won't," he interrupted gently. "Take the private elevator. I'll handle the rest." She hesitated, unsure how to read his tone. There was kindness there, but also something else, a quiet weight she didn't understand yet. When she left, the apartment felt different. Quieter, yes, but not the same kind of silence he'd lived in before. It was a silence that carried presence, like the echo of a voice that had just spoken something important. The day passed in a blur of meetings and unread messages. Every time Ethan looked across the conference table, Clara's face flashed in his mind. Her calm professionalism at work was unshaken, but he noticed the faint color that rose to her cheeks whenever their eyes met. She typed notes quickly, avoided unnecessary glances, and spoke only when needed. To everyone else, it was just another workday. To them, it was the longest day of their lives. By evening, he found himself walking down the quiet hall toward her office. She was still there, surrounded by papers and faint music playing from her phone. She didn't see him at first. The soft light from her desk lamp painted her face in warm tones. Her expression focused and tired. He cleared his throat gently. "Still working?" She jumped slightly, then laughed. "You have to stop sneaking up on people like that." "I could say the same about you," he said, smiling faintly. Her eyes narrowed playfully. "You're never letting that go, are you?" "Probably not." He stepped inside and leaned against the doorway. "But I did want to talk. About last night." Her posture straightened, the humor fading. "I'm really sorry, Ethan. I don't know how it happened," but he raised a hand. "It's fine. I'm not upset. I just keep thinking about it. Thinking about how awkward it was." "No," he said softly. "Thinking about how quiet it wasn't." She looked at him, puzzled. "Quiet?" He nodded. "For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. That's rare for me." The air between them shifted. Her eyes softened, her voice low. "Maybe it's not the company that's rare, Ethan. Maybe it's that you finally let someone see you." He didn't answer right away. The words hit something deep inside him, a place he had buried beneath deadlines and numbers. He took a slow breath. "You sound like you know what that feels like." "I do," she admitted. "When you spend too long proving your worth to the world, you forget what it means to just be. I used to work 2 jobs before this. I thought if I worked harder, I'd finally feel safe. But you never feel safe when you keep running." He studied her, the quiet conviction in her tone. "And did you stop running?" "Not yet," she said softly. "But maybe I've started to slow down." The honesty between them felt fragile, like glass held between careful hands. He wanted to thank her, but words seemed too small. Instead, he just said, "You should rest. You've done enough for one day." She smiled faintly. Says the man who's already planning tomorrow's schedule. He almost smiled back, but instead said, "Coffee tomorrow morning. My office, no reports, no meetings. Just coffee." Her brows lifted slightly. "Is that an order, sir?" "It's an invitation." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, coffee." As she gathered her things and left, Ethan lingered by the window, watching her reflection disappear down the corridor. Something had shifted. A boundary he had once believed untouchable now felt less like a line and more like a bridge. The next morning, the city woke to sunlight instead of rain. Ethan arrived earlier than usual, already regretting how much he'd thought about her overnight. When Clara walked in, dressed neatly, with her hair tied back, the air between them carried an unspoken tension. She smiled politely, but her eyes were cautious. "I brought breakfast," she said, placing a bag on his desk. "I figured you'd forget." He looked at the neatly wrapped croissants and the 2 paper cups. "You planned ahead. I learned from the best," she said quietly. They ate in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable. Every now and then, their eyes met, and something flickered, a shared understanding neither of them dared to name. "Clara," he said finally, "if this ever feels like too much, tell me." She blinked. "Too much this?" "Whatever's happening. I don't want you to feel trapped by my title, or by what people might think." Her voice was steady. "Ethan, you're my boss." "That's true. But last night, when I saw how empty that apartment was, I realized something. You're just a person trying to breathe." He nodded slowly, the words settling deep in his chest. "Maybe we both are." Outside, the morning light poured across the office like a promise. Neither of them knew where the next moment would lead. But for the first time, neither wanted to look away. Somewhere between professionalism and something far more human, a fragile connection had begun to grow quietly, stubbornly, against all rules. And as the clock ticked toward noon, Ethan realized that the story he had always written in balance sheets and boardroom meetings had just found a new chapter. One that didn't fit into any report, but felt more real than anything he had built before. The following days moved like shifting tides, quiet on the surface, but full of hidden undercurrents. At the office, Ethan and Clara fell into rhythm again. They spoke like professionals, moved through meetings, exchanged polite nods in hallways. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. But beneath that calm, something fragile and undeniable had begun to bloom. Every morning, coffee waited on his desk. Sometimes it was his doing, sometimes hers. Neither spoke of it, yet both noticed. It became their quiet ritual, the only moment in the day that felt human. That Friday, a board meeting ran late. The sky outside turned amber and gray, city lights flickering awake. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice measured as he answered question after question. Numbers, forecasts, strategy, but even as he spoke, his thoughts kept drifting to her. When the meeting finally ended, the board members filed out, their words echoing faintly in the hallway. Clara was waiting near the door, tablet in hand, her eyes tired but steady. "You survived," she said softly. "Barely," he murmured, loosening his tie. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to know you skipped lunch again." He gave a faint smile. "You sound like my conscience." "Maybe someone has to be," she said. Half teasing, half serious, they walked together toward the elevator, silence wrapping around them like a secret they hadn't yet admitted to. When the doors closed, the world seemed to fall away. Ethan turned slightly toward her. "You don't have to stay this late all the time, you know." Clara looked at him. "Neither do you." The elevator stopped at the lobby, but neither moved right away. The soft hum of the machinery filled the air, and for a heartbeat, they simply stood there, caught between duty and something dangerously close to desire. Finally, Clara stepped out. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Clara." She walked away, heels clicking softly on marble. He watched her until the glass doors closed behind her, and for reasons he couldn't explain. The silence that followed felt heavier than usual. The weekend came. But rest didn't. Ethan sat in his penthouse, surrounded by the quiet hum of rain against glass. He tried reading, tried working, but nothing held his attention. His thoughts circled back to her calm voice, her laugh, the way she looked at him without the filters everyone else used. By Sunday evening, he found himself standing outside. A small bookstore downtown, the same one she had once mentioned she visited every weekend. He told himself it was coincidence, that he just needed a walk. But when he saw her inside, head tilted toward a shelf, all his reasons dissolved. She noticed him a moment later, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Ethan." He almost laughed at himself. "Caught, I suppose." She smiled faintly, closing the book she was holding. "Didn't think CEOs wandered into used bookstores?" I didn't think assistants had such good taste, he countered. Her laughter came softly this time. Touché. They ended up walking out together, books in hand, the air cool and fresh after the rain. The city buzzed quietly around them. It's strange, she said, seeing you outside the office. You almost look relaxed. He looked at her, genuinely curious. Almost? She grinned. You still stand like you're about to negotiate a merger. He laughed then, a sound rare and unguarded. You might be the first person to say that to me. Maybe everyone else is afraid too. They stopped at a street corner, where the light reflected off puddles like fractured glass. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them carried something new, something soft, dangerous, and utterly real. Clara, he said quietly, tell me if I'm crossing a line. Her breath caught. You're not. Not yet. The words hung in the air, trembling like a confession neither dared to finish. Then she stepped back slightly, voice steadier. But we both know we could. Easily. He nodded, eyes dark with understanding. You're right. Maybe we shouldn't, she said, though her tone wavered with something that didn't sound like conviction. Maybe, he said, but maybe some lines are worth questioning. Her gaze softened. You really believe that? I don't know, he admitted. All I know is that since that night, everything feels different. Like I've been running my whole life and finally stopped long enough to breathe. For a long while. They stood in silence, rain beginning to fall again in thin silver threads. When they finally parted ways, no promises were made, no boundaries drawn, but both knew something had shifted again. Monday morning arrived with tension in the air. The office buzzed louder than usual whispers of an upcoming merger, rumors about leadership changes. Clara moved through it all with calm precision, but her thoughts were scattered. Every time she caught Ethan's gaze across the glass walls of his office, her heart starved by noon. He called her in, closed the door, he said quietly. She did. Pulse quickening. He stood by the window, back turned to her. They offered me a position overseas, he said. Her chest tightened. Overseas? London. It's a major expansion. I'd be gone for at least a year. She hesitated. That's incredible. Congratulations. But her voice betrayed her. He turned, eyes unreadable. That's not how it sounded. She looked down. I'm happy for you, Ethan. Really? You've earned it. And yet you sound like someone who just lost something. She exhaled, fighting to stay composed. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't realize how much until now. He crossed the room slowly, each step quiet but deliberate. When he stopped in front of her, his voice dropped to a whisper. You could come with me. Her eyes widened. What? I could request you as my chief assistant. It's completely within protocol. She shook her head, heart racing. Ethan, that would look, I don't care how it looks. Then you should, she said, almost pleading. Because if you stop caring everything you've built, everything that makes you, you will start to fall apart. And I don't want to be the reason that happens. He looked at her for a long moment, every muscle in his jaw tightening, every word he didn't say hanging between them. Finally, he nodded slowly. You're right, swallowed hard. You should take the offer. And if I do, then you'll go, she said, her voice trembling, and I'll stay. Because that's the line we can't cross, Ethan. The room fell silent. The city outside moved on, unaware of the quiet heartbreak inside those glass walls. He took a slow breath. And if I cross it anyway? She met his gaze, eyes shining with everything she couldn't say. Then you'll lose more than your title. You'll lose me too. That night, Ethan stood again at his window, watching the rain. His phone lay silent beside him, a single message draft unsent. You were right. But I wish you weren't. Outside, the storm rumbled softly, and for the first time in years, the man who had everything realized he didn't know how to hold on to the one thing that mattered most. And somewhere across the city, Clara sat by her own window, staring at the same rain, whispering to the night, I wish he'd crossed the line anyway.